What are mind games? Mind games are defined as an act or series of acts of calculated psychological manipulation, especially in order to confuse or intimidate. In fighting games, psychological manipulation is critical. Through psychological manipulation, you can dictate the flow of the match in a way where every situation leans heavily in your favor. If you successfully implement your mind games in a match, your opponent will feel like you're always one step ahead and will be following your flow of the combat. But in reality, they're just succumbing to your mind games. So you might ask, how do mind games work? Mind games are an act or series of acts of calculated psychological manipulation meant to confuse or intimidate your opponent. If you're able to do these things, you're putting your opponent at a mental disadvantage where they're more prone to making mistakes. So how do you go about doing that? There are no shortage of ways to do so, but I'll give you some examples. One of these examples is you can actually induce behaviors in your opponent. So what I mean is, you as the opponent can actually control what your opponent does or doesn't do within the flow of a match. You can do this by inducing your opponent to do something or getting them to avoid doing something. Let's start with the first point. There are lots of ways to induce your opponent into doing something that puts them in a bad spot. For instance, if your opponent knows you have ice daggers, and every time you back up, you follow with ice daggers and a running attack, next time, you can ice daggers and run up in critical instead. This way, they'll expect the running attack ice daggers, and you'll actually have the delayed critical. That example might not make sense for you. Here's another one. If you're using a weapon that's on the faster side, like a dagger or fists, you may notice your opponent is immediately tapping F after you parry. What you can do is you can actually delay your action, so they will have wasted their parry and they'll have to either dodge or do something else. And what you can do is off of this, you either throw out a mantra, or you just let them waste their parry. You can roll towards them and hit them. This lets you get lots of free hits, and it induces a sense of panic onto your opponent. But I also told you can force them to not do something. Here's what I mean. Let's say you have Prediction. This is one of the easiest examples. And your opponent has Radiant Dawn. They want to use Radiant Dawn after one of their wayward moves. What you can do is you use Prediction after that. This way, whenever you have Prediction off cooldown, they will be scared to use Radiant Dawn. That's one of the easiest examples. Here's another. If your opponent does a aerial attack every time they get a parry off, what you can do is you can actually do an uppercut and they can't do anything about it and you get a free hit. This way, they'll stop trying to do the aerial attack and you can actually employ a different tactic to counter them the next time. But make sure, whatever the tactics are that you employ, inducing these behaviors is very important and it's crucial to getting an advantage in a fight. And once you learn how to control what your opponent does, every interaction becomes much easier. Another way to employ mind games is confusion. One that I like to do is repeatedly doing running attacks in a chain with longer ranged weapons like a heavy weapon or a spear and something with obfuscation or a speed boost. I running attack over and over again while running just out of their attack range so I can hit them every time they try to punish me. Stupid things like this will get you some hits, but make sure you don't try it too much. You just get a good amount of their health down before they can adapt. A lot of mind games are about adapting before they can, learning how to get in before they can, and learn before they do. Another way to confuse your opponent is using modifiers that aren't usually used on something, like an Astral Wind with Cloud and Stratus Stones. Just something that makes your mantra different or a different timing. And also feinting mantras that aren't usually feinted, like Firing Range. I've seen that work. Another very simple way to cause confusion is actually to parry and not attack back. What I mean is, they'll hit, you parry, and then you just keep parrying a couple times until you feel like they're just swinging at you, and then you attack back and usually they won't parry it for some reason. Once you've learned how to employ these tactics well, you can demonstrate superiority by employing a couple of these tactics and also trash talking. Not in a way that'll get your account banned, but just enough, maybe after, before, whatever, be like even something simple, call them a clone trooper. It really doesn't have to be much, just make them mad. make them upset. Like, you can talk trash in the middle of a fight, I know that will make them really mad. Just do something that will upset your opponent. And you can, like, you know how you guard break a player? You'll mentally guard break them. And that's a very, very useful, it's very useful. And I know this might not apply as well, but if you've beaten an opponent before, it'll actually be easier to beat them again because they already know or they think that you're better than them. Even if it was a lucky win. Well, nothing's lucky, but if you were just doing really well this one fight and you beat them, the next time you fight them will actually be easier. So keep that in mind. And to avoid that, just pretend like they're a new person. Be like, that last fight, I just played it wrong, right? Don't think, oh, they're better than me. That will let them win. Thanks for watching.